This is another archival upload of my previous mix critique videos. Again, I apologize for the vertical format that this video is about to switch to. This is 136 through 140. This was sent in by Justin. He said he recorded all of this with his iPhone, so this should be interesting.
You have a million things that you wanna do. They're all laid out in front of you.
So obviously there's some limitations here if you're just recording with your phone, but all things considered, like given that, it's not too bad. I don't know, I mean, as far as the mix goes, like there's not really much that can be done. You're missing a lot of low end, but that's because of the teeny tiny little microphone in your iPhone is not designed to pick up a lot of low end. Yeah, I mean, other than that, vocals, adjust the distance you are from your phone when you're recording it. Try to get it, I don't know, change the sound a little bit. The vocals just sound a little muddy. Other than that, the biggest thing is the lack of treatment in the room. Like you can hear especially in the guitar, but also in the vocals, you can hear the space you're in around it, and it's like really detracting from what this could sound like, even with a phone mic. Like if you had a really, really well treated room, this would probably sound pretty decent, even though it was just recorded with a phone. All right, so Justin, the song is well written. Like it's a good song, it's catchy, and for that reason, I think you should definitely think about investing in some actual recording equipment or investing in studio time at a proper studio. You have a good song here, so if you could just get a really solid recording of it, like you could do something with that. For being recorded with a phone mic, it's not bad. This was sent in by Gavin. Guitar tones are pretty good, probably not as saturated as I would normally want them to be on the way in. Drums don't sound great, bass sounds alright. Honestly, it sounds like you cut way too much out of the mid-range across the board. Sounds like you have pretty much everything existing in that like 1 to 3K range, which is normally where you would go for articulation to hear like the intricacies of different parts, but it doesn't work if you boost that frequency range across all the instruments. And it sounds like in your attempt to get that high-end clarity, you gutted the mid-range because you thought that the mids were somehow competing with what the high-end is doing, and now the track just sounds empty as a result. A lot of instruments in your tracks are going to exist just in the mid-range. That's where you really get the definition between instruments, is what part of the mid-range is occupied by different instruments. So if you've gutted most of the mid-range and then just boosted those upper mids in like the 1 to 3K range, you're not going to have enough separation between the instruments, and you're not going to have a full sound. And man, all I can tell you is stop cutting the mids. You cut a lot of the mid-range out of every single instrument in this mix. This song would be immediately a lot closer to done if you just deleted all of the EQ moves that you made. This was sent in by Nate. What you're doing with the filter for all the instruments isn't bad for the intro. You could adjust those frequencies a little better so it's just a little fuller, but whatever's going on with the vocals in the intro is really painful. Like it sounds like you added distortion on top of what you're doing with the filter. Alright, when the song actually kicks in and the filters go away, it's a lot better. The drums sound a little too roomy. Like there's too much of like a really small room sound on them. For a genre like this, you'd usually want the drums to be a little more in your face. Except for the cymbals. The cymbals have a little too much high end. They're kind of harsh and they're getting kind of washy. You might have phase issues there. And then once everything kicked in, the vocals are now completely buried in the mix. Across the board, you're boosting the high mids and just the high end in general way too much, and you're not pushing the low end up enough. These are all telltale signs of you mixing in a poorly treated room. My guess would be maybe you have some acoustic foam. Acoustic foam is only good for absorbing like the highest of frequencies. It really doesn't do anything for your low end. So what's happening is you're hearing so much low end in your room because you have zero low end absorption in your space. So you're pushing the high end up way too far to combat all of the low end that you're hearing. If you get some better treatment in your room, I guarantee your mixes will improve a lot, because taking that into account, this isn't that bad. You're just pushing the high end overall way too much. This track was sent in by Luke. Alright, I was really enjoying the space on the mandolin in the intro, and then when everything comes in and the drums come in. The drums are a little too loud over everything else. I think you could probably benefit from some more mix bus compression on this. So I was enjoying the spacious sound on the mandolin in the intro, but when we get into it and there's more stuff going on, it kind of feels a little out of place. I would definitely want it to be tighter and have a lot less room sound in it. The room sound with everything else just makes everything sound a little flat. The compression on the drums themselves can use some work. They just sound a little sterile. And the cymbals are pretty washy and just the snare doesn't have enough body to it. All right, so Luke, the biggest problems I'm hearing is, first of all, either you put a reverb over the whole track and it's just way too much, or everything was recorded in a really untreated room and the sound of the room is bleeding into the mics. Honestly, kind of hard to tell which it is, but I'm probably leaning towards you put a reverb over the whole track. Like, take that down a lot or just get rid of it. Maybe just put the reverb on the mandolin, and even then, don't make it overpowering. The drum compression in general needs some work, and the whole mix could probably benefit from some more compression on the mix bus, but really the biggest thing is that overpowering room sound. This was sent in by Cornelius. Okay, so far the guitars are maybe a little bit too harsh, but mostly it sounds like they're lacking a lot of the low mids. And you asked about your bass guitar. Like, I can't even really hear the bass guitar. There's probably some in the sub lows, but again, it sounds like you took a lot out of the low mids for the bass. Like, that's where most of the energy of the whole track is gonna come from, is the like 150 to like 350, 400 hertz range. And the majority of that area is gonna be bass, guitar, and snare. So when you have the subs boosted too much in the bass and almost nothing in the low mids, you're not going to get that energy in most playback systems. Yeah, guitars are definitely just a little too harsh, and honestly, more than anything, they're fighting with the vocals. Sounds like you were boosting the guitars and the vocals in the same range, and the guitars are just completely masking the vocals. Most people want to hear the vocals. Like 95% of your audience wants to hear the vocals. Guitars should never be the loudest thing in the mix unless it's an instrumental track. Yeah, really, the guitars are overpowering everything. You gotta back the guitars down like quite a bit. Okay, so honestly, that wasn't bad overall. I think the biggest things are back the guitars down like quite a bit. Make sure they're not fighting with the vocals. You gotta focus less on the sub frequencies and more on the low mids. You took way too much out of the low mids in the guitar and the bass, and you definitely boosted the subs too much in the bass and the kick drum.